As a young kid living in a small town in Mexico, I heard many tales and stories about ghosts, spirits, witches, and even the devil. I never believed in that stuff back then. Now that I'm older and reflect on some of the things that I experienced, I am positive that evil does exist. When I was young, I lived in the small town of Porullo. The town is located in the state of Guanajuato. The town has now become more modern with paved roads and cars, but when I lived there, everything was much simpler. The interesting thing about this town is that it is located between tall hills. During the summer, when the vegetation grew at its fullest, the hills would turn into dense forest. The vegetation was so dense that only the most experienced hunters would go out in groups to try and catch animals. I always wanted to go into the forest with the others. I wanted to learn how to shoot and hunt as well. I'd always bother my older cousin Jose, who was one of the guys who went out regularly and spent days tracking animals and hunting them. Finally, one day my cousin agreed to take me with him and his friends. I knew most of the other guys and was ecstatic about finally getting to go hunting. There were a total of 7 guys going, including myself. Jose told me that I had to listen to him no matter what. He told me it could get dangerous and he had to take care of me. Being super excited, I agreed to whatever he said without giving it any thought. We were leaving the next evening. I was so excited that I barely slept that night. The next day, Jose helped me pack all the essentials into a backpack that he had. We headed to the edge of the town where the forest began. Most of the guys were already there waiting. Everybody had their rifles and were fully prepped. The weather was not really cooperating. The sun was nowhere to be found as it was covered by dense rain clouds. I wasn't worried though. We all had rain gear on and were ready to go. As the last guy joined us, we all started moving into the forest. As we walked in further, it began to drizzle. The raindrops could be heard hitting the leaves on the shrubs around us. Everyone was quiet. The only other noise that could be heard was the wet ground that we stepped on. We walked for what seemed like an eternity. We followed a path that had been made by others walking through it, but the further we went, the narrower the path got. By this time, 4 of the guys had caught some animals. A few rabbits and squirts were their catch. The 4 guys had turned around and walked back to town. They were happy with their kills and wanted to get out of the rain. This meant there was only one other guy, my cousin, and myself. Jose and the other guy were super competitive and didn't want to stop going forward yet, so we continued. The little daylight that could be seen before was now gone. It was pitch dark. Not even the moon could shine through the clouds at this point. The only lights that we had were reflectores, flashlights that we wore on our head. The battery pack was strapped to the belt around our waist. At this point, I was starting to get a little freaked out. The rain was now coming down harder and the path was very narrow. Jose walked in front of me with his rifle over his shoulder and a machete in his hand. He would use it to cut through any brush that was in the way. Behind me was the other guy. He carried his rifle in his hands and he kept swiveling his head left and right while scanning for animals. After a while, the rain slowed down to a drizzle again. Everything became even quieter. It was an eerie silence. There was no wind, no crickets, no birds, nothing. "Jose," I called out, "I want to go back." Something didn't feel right. It felt like the temperature had dropped. Every time I took a breath, I could see it in the beam of my flashlight. "We can't go back yet," he answered. "Someone asked me to bring them back a rabbit." At that point, I understood that they didn't do this for fun, but as a job. People from the town would ask them to go hunt them a rabbit or a squirrel to make food with. I didn't bother him again and kept walking. While walking in complete silence, we heard a noise. It sounded like a twig breaking. Everyone turned towards the noise. Jose put down his machete and grabbed his rifle. The guy behind me did the same. We stood there frozen, waiting for an animal to come into the light of our flashlights. I was excited to finally catch something and go home. As we scanned around, we heard another noise. It was not ordinary to hear this in the middle of the forest. We started to hear what sounded like a baby whining and crying. I was surprised to hear it, but wasn't scared. I didn't know what to think. I looked over at my cousin, hoping to get some instructions on what to do. He was frozen in place with his eyes wide. He looked at the other guy. He had the same expression as he stared back. "Es una pinche bruja con un niño, güey," the other guy whispered to Jose. He was implying that we were hearing was a witch and a baby that she had taken. I immediately started to panic. As I looked up at them, I heard the baby's cry change. The high-pitched cry turned into a deeper voice. I can still hear it in my head as clearly as I heard it then. I was paralyzed with fear. I started shivering uncontrollably. I fully expected to see some demonic figure staring back at me. Before I could say anything to Jose, he grabbed me by the waist and put me over his shoulder. The other guy grabbed the machete and started running back through the path. I could tell that they were both just as scared as I was. As I bounced up and down on Jose's shoulder, I looked behind us. I scanned the path for what now sounded like growling that continued to follow us. My cousin kept telling me to close my eyes, but I didn't listen. I kept looking back. Both of the guys were now running as fast as they could, jumping over small logs on the way down. Jose was falling behind because of the extra weight that I added. He came up to another log on the path. He did his best to jump over it, but clipped his back foot on it. He tried his hardest to keep his balance as he stumbled. In doing so, he accidentally pulled the cord out of my battery. The flashlight on my head immediately turned off as I looked back. My eyes adjusted to the darkness and I saw something on the path. I was not able to see the details very well, but I could see what looked like a deformed dog. The skin was pale. This was the only reason I was able to see it in the dark. I knew it wasn't a dog though. There was no fur, only skin. The only other thing I can compare it to is a very skinny, elongated human. "Jose, I see it," I yelled as I reached down to reconnect my flashlight. He didn't say anything, just kept running. I finally managed to feel around and reconnect the flashlight. The beam of light flooded the path behind us. As the light hit that thing that was following us, I saw how bony and pale it was. It ran hunched forward but on two legs. There was black hair on the top of its head that covered the face. I didn't know it then, but I now remember seeing this thing as having sagging breasts, like an old woman. As I continued to look at it, I started to cry out of fear. I knew it was going to catch up to us and kill us. As I cried on Jose's shoulder, I heard a loud gunshot. It was the other guy that was with us. He made it far enough down the path that he was able to turn around and aim at the thing that was chasing us. As the shot rang through the trees, I heard the scream of a woman. I immediately looked back at the path. I saw that thing stop and hunch over in pain. We all looked as it continued to scream. The scream sounded like a combination of pigs wailing and a woman screaming. Jose put me on the ground and grabbed his rifle from his shoulder. He lifted the rifle and aimed at the screaming witch before he was able to get a shot off. The witch jumped off the trail and into the thick bushes. The screaming continued, but it got further and further away. Jose immediately grabbed me again as they both ran down the path. I buried my head in my hands in fear of seeing that thing again. After running for what seemed forever, we arrived at the edge of the town. Jose put me down as he struggled to catch his breath. "No le digas a nadie. Don't tell anyone," he said. The other guy began walking back towards where we lived. I kept my word to my cousin and didn't tell anyone, not even my family. I feel like there's a bond between me and my cousin because of that night. He and the other guys continued to go hunting after that, but I never asked to go on another trip again. About a month later, I heard a story about some guy from the next town over who almost got killed while hunting. He had separated himself from the group and got lost. The rest of the group started looking for him. He was found passed out on the ground with a bunch of black hair clenched in his fist. He had really deep scratches all over his face and arms. The story goes that he caught the wounded witch by the hair, but she was able to get away by attacking him. This was my experience 18 years ago while studying at University of St. Thomas in Manila. I was in a dorm at the back of the university, one of those old ladies only dormitories managed by nuns. The building was old, mostly made of wood and perpetually dark, probably because it was all wood and there was not much natural light. I was in a room with 3 other ladies. Each of us had our own single bed. Our room was very spacious and on the topmost floor. Our bathroom and toilet were in the hallway, and we were sharing it with the other rooms on the floor. For some reason, among my roommates, I was always the one who slept late at night. So when I would get ready for bed, I was more likely to be alone in the hallway bathroom. One time while brushing my teeth, I saw in my peripheral vision a girl in a camisole-type pajama running from the entrance door of the bathroom into the first stall. I was so sleepy that time that I automatically went to the stall only to find out it was empty. There I was, shocked but also very sleepy. First, it was close to midnight. The dormitory's curfew for visitors was only until 10 p.m. Also, the child was about 5 to 6 years old. How could there be a child here when we were all college students? Plus, the whole floor was so quiet and no one was obviously awake. Now that I was fully awake, I realized that the child's skin looked eerily gray and silverish. I didn't even think about crying anymore and ran back to our room. I decided to keep it a secret from my roommates because I knew they were scared. The second encounter happened not long after. That day, I had a long break in between classes, so I decided to spend it in the dorm. When I opened the door to the room, I saw the same kid jumping on my bed. He jumped down from my bed to the floor and vanished. The floor looked like it had a hole in it when he disappeared. Again, I still kept it a secret. Then I became ill. I felt dizzy, no appetite, and always cold. It was like having chills but without the fever. Cold, clammy, and sweaty. My mother thought I was just stressed because of my studies, but I decided to tell her about the kid. She knew what to do next. She took me to the Abulario at the foot of the mountain near us where we lived in Montalban. In Filipino culture, an Abulario is a folk healer or a witch doctor of sorts. They use traditional medicine, herbs, spiritual rituals, and holistic methods to treat their patients. The moment I stepped into the Abulario's house, he took one look at me and didn't have to say a word. He said that there is a child who is always close to you and has no intention of humiliating you. He is just lost and looking for someone to always be with. He advised me to always wear something red, even if it was underwear or a handkerchief, and to wrap myself in a red blanket in the dorm at night. I followed his advice, and soon enough, I regained my health. Then I had a dream, or more like a nightmare. In my dream, I was sleeping on my bed in the dorm, and suddenly someone was banging on our door aggressively. When I opened the door, I was face to face with a white woman with glaring eyes. No sound, but she seemed very angry and yelling at me to leave that place. When I looked behind me, I saw that the entire room was on fire. Then I woke up. Normally I would have kept quiet, but then I noticed that my 3 roommates had woken up from a bad dream as well. After sharing what we experienced, we realized that we all had the same dream. We freaked out there, so we decided to report it to the dorm's management. She said that before the building was donated to their congregation decades ago, it was a place where the Chinese immigrants of Binondo hid during the Second World War. That actually made sense to us, because the lady we all dreamt about was white and Chinese. As you can imagine, we all left the dorm. My cousin and I looked for a dormitory not too far from the university and our old dorm. It was only a street away. I thought we finally escaped and could start anew. Turns out we were wrong. I saw the kid again in the hallway of our new dorm. I found him one afternoon, crouched outside my room door. It was like he was waiting for me because when I turned into the hallway, I saw him immediately looking at me, like he was expecting me. The same second that I looked at him, he vanished into thin air. I got frustrated and said out loud, "Please follow the light. Take a break." That's the last time I saw him until I graduated and eventually moved out for good. Now I remember telling this story to one of my friends in our class. I soon realized the person I chose to open up to was wrong because he was so skeptical that he ended up mocking me and my experience. We never talked about it again. When I graduated, that same classmate continued to pursue medicine, so he ended up renting a condo located on the same street where my old dormitory was. One day, I received a message from him several years after we graduated, apologizing for not believing my story back then. turns out that one afternoon, he and his roommate were looking out from their window, observing the kids playing on the street. His roommate told him, "Do you know that little girl at the end? She has a friend that none of the other kids can see." It turned out that his roommate had a third eye and described to him the appearance of the little ghost. It was the same description I gave him several years ago. I am a woman in my late 60s. About 13 years ago, after my children were all grown up and living on their own, my husband and I decided to sell our old home and move across the country to a new city. This is a recollection of all the experiences my husband and I had living in that house for 12 years until finally selling the house a year ago. For context, this is a 2-story split-level home. Upon entering the front door, you would immediately be in the living room, and straight ahead would be the kitchen. To the left were stairs going up to the bedrooms. Parallel to those stairs were another set of stairs going down to the den, which my husband more or less turned into a man cave. On that same level was a door to the garage, and finally down below was the basement. One afternoon, I was upstairs in my bedroom. My husband was in his man cave. I heard a loud crashing noise that sounded like pots and pans falling. I ran downstairs to the kitchen, expecting to see a broken cabinet door and a mess, but there was nothing. I went down to ask my husband if he had also heard the noise, but he was fast asleep. From then on, there were a series of strange occurrences that would happen. Every time I would buy a pack of chewing gum and place it on the counter, it would mysteriously disappear. And my husband does not chew gum. Often when watching TV, my husband and I would hear things drop in other parts of the house, but when we would check, there would be nothing there. Sometimes, whether my husband and I were either in the same room or not, we would both hear what sounded like someone running up the stairs, followed by a sudden thud at the top of the stairs, but no one would be there. Nearly every day that I was off from work, between 2 p.m. and 2:30 p.m., I would hear the door to enter the den from the garage open, but no one would be there. When I would be at work, my husband would sometimes hear movement upstairs in the bedrooms, but once he would go upstairs to check, every room was empty. There would be times I would go down to the basement to do laundry and would feel a strange presence, almost as if I wasn't wanted there. I would immediately head upstairs. My daughter, who would visit from time to time, would sometimes say she would hear disembodied voices at the foot of the stairs. Some days, I would find the crank from my bathroom window mysteriously on the floor. A cloth doll that I had placed sitting up would sometimes be turned over on its stomach, and a decorative plaque on the wall in my closet would be on the floor. Several times when coming home from work, I could see the light from my bathroom through the window, but no one else would be home. Once I would go inside the house, the bathroom light would be off. My husband would work late, sometimes past midnight. Those nights were the worst. I would be sitting at my desk on my computer and would feel as if someone were pushing or poking me from behind. I would never be able to sleep unless the lights were on and I was watching TV. When I would eventually fall asleep, it would feel as if someone were trying to pull me out from under the sheets. And when I would sit up, the TV remote would be at the foot of the bed instead of right next to me where I left it. Sometimes I would hear what sounded like people having a party in the kitchen. It got to the point I would never leave my room any night my husband was at work, unless one of my children were in town visiting. Things improved a little bit once my husband retired, but since he was a night owl watching TV until very late, and I'm a light sleeper that had to wake up at 5 a.m. for work, he would often sleep in the guest room, most likely unaware of my persistent night terrors. Over the years, I would burn sage and open all the windows in the house to expel any bad spirits. This would work for a time, but eventually the occurrences would pick up again. until one night, finally, I had enough. I had taken a large piece of sage and some holy water. I sprinkled holy water throughout the entire house from top to bottom and stopped upon finishing the master bedroom. I took a small aluminum foil pan and laid it on top of my bed. I lit the sage and placed it into the pan. It was at this moment I distinctly heard what sounded like a female laughing. I remember saying out loud, "So, you're a woman." Less than an hour later, I decided to lay down to go to sleep. As I was drifting off, I felt what seemed like a large arm lay across my chest, and a male voice whispered to me, "Don't worry, I'm here to protect you." I knew it wasn't my husband as he was still downstairs watching TV, but I was already so tired that I didn't question it and soon fell asleep. From the next day on, the occurrences stopped. No more hearing random items dropping on the floor or someone running up the stairs. No more missing gum or bathroom lights turning themselves on and off. No more finding my cloth doll and TV remote in different positions from where I had left them. No more feeling uncomfortable in my own basement or finding items that mysteriously fell to the floor. No more disembodied voices, footsteps, or doors opening at the same time every day. And best of all, no more night terrors. As far as I know, before we purchased that home, there wasn't a dark history with any of the previous owners, and the house was less than 50 years old, having been built in the early 1980s. I don't know what protected me that night, if it was a guardian angel or just pure coincidence. I'm just glad to finally be out of there.